Hello and welcome to episode 4 of the world's first Paul Weller fan podcast. I'm Dan Jennings, and 10 years ago I gave up my life dream and career as a radio presenter with one big regret: never getting to interview my hero, the legendary British musician Paul Weller. This podcast exists purely to solve that issue. Welcome to Desperately Seeking Paul. We'll be talking to the followers, the friends, the people who have written about him, created with him, been influenced by him, idolised him, and so much more. And I have to say, thank you for listening. Thanks for your feedback, your comments, your love of the podcast so far. It's been an absolute joy to see it all coming through on Twitter. So please do download, subscribe, leave a review, and spread the word. It all helps. This week, we head back to the 90s, to the height of Britpop, and the man who was in control of Paul Weller's return to live performance on primetime TV. Ric Blaxill joins us, the former exec producer on Top of the Pops, and a massive, massive Weller fan as well. Now, Rick is a former BBC Radio 1 producer, was once head of programmes at BBC Radio 6 Music, and group creative director at Capital Radio. For the past 13 years, Rick has been at Bauer Media, where he is music and content director for the amazing, hugely popular, multi-award-winning radio stations Planet Rock, Kerrang, Heat, and newbie Scala Radio. We had a great chat in this episode, which also includes the story of my very first meeting with Mr. Weller. So listen out for that as well. Right, let's get into it. Hi, Rick. Good to see you.
It's a pleasure, Dan, and good to see you as well.
This year, it's been pretty bonkers, right? And in the world of radio, your industry is booming right now.
Yeah, it is. And it goes back to those real basic qualities that sometimes get overlooked about radio. And it's just about the companionship that it brings. And I think, people are going through, some pretty unsettling times, but you can turn the radio on and there's a familiar voice and there's some music you like, and you can engage with it, and it's just a valuable friend. And I think, it's got that curation and that companionship that maybe some streaming services don't offer. And obviously radio and streaming are quite complementary, but in this particular time we're in now, radio's strengths have really shone through.
Now, you talked about music there and the kind of power of music. You're a guy who clearly is passionate about music, having spent X amounts of years in the industry. Clearly, this is something that still excites you.
Yeah, it is, and and it's through it's a work and it's hobby. I'm very lucky to have worked across a lot of different brands and a lot of different stations, a lot of different formats. But my appetite for music of all genres is huge, and I'm even still in a punk band that I've been in for years. So gutted that we can't do any gigs at the moment. And that's the other thing, just missing live music. You just think, man, you used to see so many gigs every week, and now it's just kind of dried up. So understandably, but I can't wait for live music, to return. But there's still so much great music out there. And new stuff being signed. Rock is in a really powerful position. Lots of great stuff coming through from a rock perspective. And I'm also working across Scala Radio, which is a classical station we set up about 18 months ago. And the releases that are coming through from the classical world are incredible. So many new young artists being signed. That whole scene is very much alive. And I think some people could think classical music is a bit of a museum piece, but it's not. It's connected on a new level with a younger audience. And, very proud that Scala's a part of that.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned live music, which is something I hadn't really thought about, actually, but that kind of gigging thing. Who'd have thought we'd miss being crushed in the front row of a mosh pit?
Oh, man, I know. And like a couple of weekends ago, we were due to go with some mates. We just go to the punk weekender up at Butlins at Skegness. We were going for years, and everyone was so gutted, that we weren't going to be there. All these aging punks popping away to Jam 69.
What are you doing in this punk band? I didn't know this about you. What role do you play? Are you frontman?
Well, yeah, I am. I was going to say I sing, but I bark more than I sing. But I guess that's the spirit of it, isn't it?
Now, this podcast is as much about music as it is about the legend that is Paul Weller, and my kind of search to kind of be able to interview the great man. I guess punk is a good place to start in terms of kind of Weller and the Jam arriving in that kind of early days of punk, and maybe not seeing themselves in that kind of whole punk world, but certainly at the same kind of time as the Pistols and the Clash and stuff.
Oh, geez, man. Right from the very start, I was in punk bands at school and we were playing In the City, their version of Midnight Hour. When you saw them, that energy, I think that's what probably linked them into punk. The energy on stage was incredible, and they were a young band and they looked the part, and the songs were short and they were really highly powered. Paul Weller, just the most amazing frontman, a real relatable character. as the jam progressed, so did our set list into like A-Bomb, Waldorf Street, down in the tube station at midnight. You know, we kept covering jam songs. We're just like obsessed. And I think the thing is with Paul, and you very rarely see this, but he loves his guitar. When you see him play, there's a look in his eye, and he loves his guitar. Some people play a guitar, but he loves his guitar.
Yeah.
And it's just an incredible thing to see.
Yeah, it's kind of mesmerising. I mean, my missus will kind of take the mickey out of this, of kind of like the only person that I would leave her for would be Paul Weller. Because I think there's that thing when you're kind of front row looking at somebody who's that into playing and the guitar stuff, I don't think necessarily he's kind of recognised as much for the guitar work as for the songs and the writing and stuff. But he's an incredible guitarist, right?
Yeah, amazing guitarist, and you know, the master of just the riff, the lick, you know, and the right duration. And we saw that during you know, his time with the Jam, and then as an artist, as he developed, you know, through Style Council, his solo material, you know, you got to, you know, the melody of the lyrics he creates. I mean, stuff like Shifting Sands, Wildwood, you know, just really lyrics that connect and very emotional. You know, as a songwriter as well, I think that energy and all that excitement around the Jam was really powerful. And then as he's just progressed through his career, you know, the strength of his songwriting, the quality of his lyrics were just like something else. I mean, he's a total jewel in the crown of, you know, British songwriting, without a doubt.
Now, you were there at the top of the pops of what's now called the Ric Blaxill era. I don't know if you know this.
Is it?
Yeah, genuinely, this is what people call it in forums online. Obviously, a really key time from kind of like the 90s Britpop, that kind of Cool Britannia kind of period.
Yeah. What
are your memories of that time? Because that must, I mean, career-wise, that must have been like, you know, such an exciting time for British music right then, was kind of like just off the scale.
Yeah, it was. And I think, you know, I was kind of lucky really in terms of the time that I did the show. I was given a bit more freedom than perhaps the show had been given in terms of how to program it. So it was always programmed around whatever the top 10 entries were in the chart. I just felt that was too restrictive, and you could have great songs charting at the lower end of the chart but would sell lots of albums that was perhaps more reflective. So I kind of played around with the format a little bit, but that coincided with brilliant pop music coming through, you know, and it could be Take That and E17, Spice Girls, you know, all of that stuff was happening, which was quality British pop. And then you had Britpop as well, with, you know, what was going on with Oasis and Blur and all those other bands around that, like Sleeper, and then and Elastica, and then on top of that, you know, you had more established artists coming back onto the show because they felt it was better. People like Bowie, Kate Bush, and people coming back that had said they'd never do it before. Madonna. It was an amazing time. But I think I was lucky because the quality of the music, that 90s era, was so strong on so many levels. So I had a pretty easy job, really, just putting the best.
Oh no, but you know, what a gig though, I must say. And there's a story about Weller as well that I've read, whereby trying to get him on, and there was a thing about miming. Do you remember this?
Yeah, no, I do. I remember it really clearly. And when I took over the show, my view was, in terms of miming, singing live, I'm cool either way. You know, some bands were like pop bands, which visually brilliant, you know, great dancing, well choreographed and all that kind of stuff. But, you know, to do all that and sing at the same time, you know, might not be the best thing. It's about the performance. So I was cool either way. I didn't want like a great band doing a brilliant dance routine and being out of breath when they're trying to sing. You know, it's not a gig. You know, it's like a TV show. So I was pretty cool on that. And then I read an interview, and I think it was in the Q or Mojo, and someone asked Paul about, would he do Top of the Pops? And he said something like, you know, well, it's getting better, but I'll never do it because she can't play live. And I read that, and I was in the office at Top of the Pops. I was like, oh my God, I didn't even think he'd even consider doing it. So I called the record label and I said, have you got a contact for Paul's management company? And they gave me a contact. So I got in contact with them and said, look, I just read this. If all that's stopping Paul doing Top of the Pops is that he can't play live, he's welcome with open arms, mate, and I'll make it happen live. And he can do 2 songs, and he can do like a new single and something from his back catalogue. And there was then this like, you being serious? Because no one had played on live on Top of the Pops for about 50 years. And I was like, yeah, completely serious. So I got the crew together and was saying, look, I want to try and achieve this. How can we do it? Then their guys started to talk to our tech guys, then talking to Paul and his management about what the tracks were. And eventually he came on and did Peacock Suit, then straight into Changing Man. So, and no one had done 2 songs on Top of the Pops back to back either. And that led on to interesting stuff. So Prince ended up doing that. Ramones ended up doing that. So it worked. But it was such a buzz having Paul Weller on Top of the Pops playing live. It was just something else. And when you think, wow, that's a real moment for the audience.
That's so cool. That's so cool. And I think there's been another couple of occasions where you've come across Paul and worked with him directly on. Was it that you produced a show with Ian Wright? Was it Friday Night with Ian Wright? Was that right?
Yeah. Produced that show, and I was a big Arsenal fan. Met Wrighty over the years, and we decided we'd put this TV format together and went to ITV. Yeah, and they bought the idea, and it was flipping amazing. So there's Wrighty hosting it, and we knew Lennox Lewis, so we got Lennox Lewis. He was world boxing champion at the time as the security on the door, and then I phoned up Pete Tong, who's an Arsenal fan, and went, look, I want a DJ playing in and out of the breaks. Fancy it? It's with Wrighty, and Tongy was like, yes, please. So we got this amazing show. And then it was just getting people of the right sort of sensibilities, and who would get what Wright is about. And it was a little bit anarchic in its spirit. But it worked really well, and Paul was a fantastic, guest on that. We've been very lucky, in the ways our paths have crossed.
One thing, obviously, one of your radio stations is really big on Kerrang, really big on new music. And I think one of the things that I love about Paul is that kind of those recommendations that you get from artists. So he's kind of somebody who really supports new music, really supports new band. Every time you read a music kind of interview with him, he's kind of talking about somebody else that he's kind of recommending is kind of discovered. That's a kind of really important part of music for me, that kind of self-discovery and all that kind of recommendation, that kind of influence. How does that come about? How does that work for you for radio as well? Because presumably, the stations that you program and you're passionate about and stuff, those presenters are always recommending new music to me.
Yeah, and I think the best policy, with those stations, that I do look after, essentially the people that are on air are fans anyway. There are people that want to be radio presenters, and there are fans that happen to get on the radio. And I think, with Planet Rock and Kerrang, their lives are rock. And, and if they weren't doing it on a rock station, they ain't going to go on any other station. That's all they want to do. So they're absorbing music all the time. Like I'm absorbing music all the time. And you listen to recommendations because you trust people's opinions. And just going back to Paul, that's a massive strength in the quality of the person that he is and the generosity of spirit that he's got. Because if you're trying to, cut your way through and you get a recommendation or a name check from someone of the quality of Paul, confidence that will give you and those around you and how that will ripple out is absolutely incredible. So it's an amazing thing to be, working in music, but also it's there's a responsibility that comes with that. And I think, that's being respectful to artists and sharing stuff that you think, needs a wider audience.
The career that you've had, you must be somebody who's kind of, you've got a million stories. We could talk all day, which is fantastic. But they're kind of particular kind of career highlights in the world of music and kind of bands and artists that kind of stand out to you as huge, big icons and kind of those people who really kind of shapes your way of thinking and your kind of love of music, those kind of experiences that you can share with us.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of Iron Maiden, and that goes back to when I was producing the breakfast show on Radio 1 with Simon Mayo, and we used to have a record of the week. And back in those days, Radio 1 was pretty safe and not going to craze the horses out a bit. And we made Bring Your Daughter to the Slaughter record of the week, and we're hammering this out at breakfast time. And I remember the controller at the time calling me in his office going, what are you doing? You're playing a rock show at 7:23 on a Monday morning, playing a rock song at 7:23 on a Monday morning. And that relationship with Iron Maiden has continued. We do great work with them on Planet Rock. I was even fortunate enough to play, in their football team for a while, which was, quite amazing. And we've done some great work with Bruce Dickinson over the years as well. So, I've just been very, very lucky, meeting people like Michael Jackson and Madonna and David Bowie. I feel very, very fortunate. And every single time you're having to pinch yourself going, can't actually believe this is happening. I just feel very privileged to have been in those positions and have met those people. I often get asked, well, you met a lot of people, who's been the arse, who's been the one that's... And I can honestly say, I've met some interesting characters, but none of them, I would say, have been offered any kind of, trouble, resistance or anything to anything that we're trying to achieve. It's about having a conversation. So, I feel very lucky from that point of view as well.
I mean, all of those kind of you would class as music icons, I would say. Is there something you can put your kind of finger on in terms of what makes them different? What makes somebody like that kind of make it versus hundreds of thousands of kind of very talented musicians who will just never get there? It's not just luck, it's not just time and place. There must be more than that.
No, it's not just luck. And that's a really interesting point. So after I finished up the Pops, I went to work for a record label called Independiente, and I was doing A&R there. And incidentally, we signed Paul to Independiente after he left Island Records. So that's the game. The incredible thing there was, it was just listening to all the music that was coming through. And there was a level of competency amongst so many bands that sent stuff in where you couldn't fault their playing. Everything was in tune and the songs were good. But it's just that X factor you can't put your finger on until you hear something and you just go, wow, where did that come from? And you can't define it. It's really difficult. I think that's obviously a great challenge of A&R, back in that day anyway. It's like, well, who's got these amazing songs that connect? And it's difficult from that point of view, but it's obvious when it happens. But then I think when you're working with, I remember when we had Madonna on Top of the Pops, and her manager called me and said, "Oh, look, she's rehearsing down in Baker Street. Do you want to come down and see, how the rehearsals are going?" So I got in a cab and went down to Baker Street, walked into this rehearsal room, and there's just the manager and Madonna. And she's going, "Oh, hi, Rick, how are you?" And I'm, you're like, inside you're going, "Shit." Yeah. And but I had a kind of professional responsibility, so I had a conversation with her about that. And then we sat down and we were chatting, and then she was saying things like, "So what stage am I going to be on? And what are your thoughts about the lighting? And how many cameras are going to be used?" And I thought, man, this is someone. No wonder they're where they are. It's that attention to detail. And it wasn't do it like this. It was like, what are you thinking? So I said, it's this stage. This is the layout of the studio. I'm thinking, as you're a solo performer, it will be there. Listening to the track, I was going to use a lot of soft blue light, and I was going to use a lot of tracking shots and not too much on handheld to keep it nice and smooth. And then off the bat, she said, "Oh yeah, I like the blue. I'm going to go down to," and I forget the shop, but there's a lovely Chanel suit that I've seen, which is a gorgeous blue, which I think will be picked up wonderfully in the light. And you're like, man, this is just some incredible conversation. So we had that meeting, and I haven't told anyone this before. I've left, and she's actually performed the song. The song's come through this massive, great PA, and I'm just sitting there, and she's like doing what she's doing, and it's quite incredible, amazing as well. And then she asked me what I thought. And I was like, "I think that's pretty good, Madonna."
Yeah, it's all right.
But then I went outside and phoned my best mate straight away. It was like, "You never guess what just happened." Like the fan came out.
So I mean, that's my worry. So I've kind of I've had the pleasure of meeting Paul twice. Once was working for Eagle Radio. I was like doing some street team stuff at the time, and we had a promotion with Nectar where we were in a shopping centre in Sainsbury's handing out chocolate bars. And this white transit van pops up. This is in Cobham, around that way. And we're like, "Oh my God, it's Wen." And he went in, did his shopping, came out, and a colleague of mine managed to grab him to come over to the van and give him a chocolate bar. And all I could think to say was, big fan, big fan. That was it. So in my head for donkey's years, there'd been this kind of thing of like, when you get to meet him, you'll say this, and there's this kind of intelligent conversation, and you'll, at the very least, you talk about the fact, what his music and has meant to you kind of growing up and stuff. Yeah. Big fan. So there's always been this ridiculous regret of like, oh, for God's sake, why didn't I say more than that? Yeah, have you ever been starstruck? I mean, sort of the Madonna, I guess, is a kind of example of that, but at least you knew what to say, right? Yeah,
I've been starstruck a lot, and probably the first time that really happened to me was when I started at Radio 1. And, I'd grown up listening to Capital and Radio 1, and I got this trainee producer job at Radio 1. I started on the same day as another trainee producer. There were two of us that had got these jobs. And I walked into the HR department, sitting on this bench, and I don't know how much you're into punk music then, but sitting on this bench next to where I had to sit to pick up my staff card was Jake Burns from Stiff Little Fingers. Oh. And I'm like, and I was in a band at the time, in this punk band, and we were covering inflammable material and all this kind of stuff, Suspect Device. And I walked in, I'm like, "Jake Burns." And he was like, "Yeah." And I said, "What are you doing here?" He's like, "I was starting as a trainee producer with some other bloke." And I went, "I'm the other bloke." But then you get into Radio 1 and you're walking around, and there is, that era of Steve Wright and Simon Bates and Mike Reid and John Peel and, all these. And I'm like, I was walking around starstruck for about 2 weeks, and Gary Davis was big at that time as well, and a lovely guy. I just had to kind of give myself a slap around the chops and go, Rick, this is your job now. You can't go around being starstruck. You just need to get on with your job. So it was just a shift of mindset. But I think if you're a music fan, that moment, whatever your job is inside, it's difficult to do that professional, not feel nervous, but make them welcome. And the same with David Bowie going over when he came on to Top of the Pops as well. It's like, goodness me, it's David Bowie. He's back on the show, which was amazing. But then, what do you go and say? And I wanted to make him feel welcome. But, he was such everybody is wonderful once you start the conversation. So I think, I've been very lucky in some of those meetings, definitely.
Thank you for your time, Rick. 2 final questions for you. So if there's a Weller song, which one would it be? If you have one left for your entire life that you can listen to, what is it right now? And secondly, if I do secure the interview with Weller, what one thing should I make sure I cover off?
Okay, the song, Paul's catalogue is incredible, but Changing Man, I think, is such an incredible song. The lyrics on it, it gets me every time. And I think, no matter what stage you are in your life, that song can have a really different meaning for you. So, it meant an incredible amount to me at one point. And the sincerity around it was brilliant. And the analysis of, you don't want to go too deep on this because he's clearly just got all this stuff out of his soul. But you look at those lyrics and the song and just how it's produced, fantastic. I'd ask him, who, in terms of collaboration, would he want to work with? And that could be someone who's no longer with us or someone who's with us now. So who would his dream collaborator be on the track?
Good question. You can see why you're in this job, man.
You caught me on the hop there, Del.
You never lose it, man. You never lose it. Hey, Rick, it's been so lovely to catch up. It's been really nice to talk to you. Thank you so much for all the tips, the hints, the stories. It's been an education, but more than that, it's been an absolute joy. So thank you.
Well, it's been great to see you as well, Dan. I'm glad everything's going good.
There you go. What a bunch of great stories from Ric Blaxill. Love that. Right, that's it for episode 4. Next week, I'm joined by Lee Cogswell, director of so many great films from Paul Weller over the past few years, including the 2020 Style Council's Sky Arts TV documentary. Lee has had incredible access to Paul from the Jawbone soundtrack through to A Kind Revolution, True Meanings, and On Sunset, creating brilliant documentaries for each of them. And don't forget, download, subscribe, review, give us a little retweet, and help to spread the word. @WellerFanPod on Twitter. See you next week.